Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. All right, obviously not a ton going on the court since there have been no games played since I recorded late Monday night. So let's transition off the court where there are, of course, still a few big job openings available. DePaul, it looks as though Kenny Payne is eventually going to be the guy. Marquette, kind of an interesting opening. Could it be a place that Shaka Smart, a Wisconsin native, by the way, almost took the job in 2014? Could it be a spot that Shaka Smart tries to get to before Texas can fire him either this offseason or the following one? We'll see. Stay tuned. But, of course, the biggest job, the one I want to update you on, and I got to be honest, the one that I'm starting to get a little bit worried about is what's going on in Indiana. Nick Coffey and I will talk about this in a minute when Nick Coffey joins me, but I'm just going to tell it to you like it is. I may be like the last person on planet Earth that still thinks Indiana is a good coaching job. Listen, you have history, and I know history doesn't mean a ton to current recruits and current players, but it does matter to coaches considering taking the job. Obviously, they can pay well. They just paid Archie Miller $10 million to go away. Also, say what you want about Archie Miller. He proved that you can still recruit at a high level at Indiana. He landed Trace Jackson Davis. He landed Romeo Langford. He landed Christian Lander. And so I still believe that this is a really good job. But again, I'm starting to get worried as to what I'm seeing out of the Indiana camp and Indiana kind of broader picture in Bloomington as far as what is going on with this job. So let's give you a quick update as to what has happened and where it stands. And look, obviously, as I just referenced a minute ago, Archie Miller was let go about 10 days ago, last Monday. It is now obviously Thursday the 25th. And when he was let go, obviously there was this long list of just super desirable candidates. And like any job, I think it's great to shoot for the moon, shoot for the stars, and try to get the best possible candidate you can. And so we all know who the names were. It was Brad Stevens, the Celtics coach, who is, of course, from Indiana, coached at Butler. It's Scott Drew, who played at Butler, now at Baylor, grew up in Indiana playing for, or growing up under Valparaiso coach Homer Drew. He is, of course, Homer Drew's son, so he grew up in Indiana. It took me a while to basically say that Scott Drew is Homer Drew's son, but he's in the picture. You wonder if Chris Beard would be interested, a guy that has gone from job to job to job to job to job, and obviously has ties loosely to the program because of the fact that he worked under Bobby Knight. Eric Musselman, the head coach at Arkansas. But really, since that initial list of candidates came out, it's kind of been crickets in terms of the big names. Brad Stevens officially said that he is not interested in the job. It took him about 2 or 3 press conferences to do it. And then everybody else, it's been kind of quiet in terms of, again, those really big names. And oh, by the way, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I know everybody wants to crush Indiana on everything, but there is still the possibility that Indiana is either pursuing, interested in, or knows that they can eventually get a head coach currently in the NCAA tournament, whether it is Scott Drew, whether it is Chris Beard, who obviously his season just ended Sunday, whether it is Eric Musselman, whether it is Porter Moser, a guy that, I'll be honest, I didn't really think he should be considered until I saw what he did to Illinois, and now I'm sitting there saying, look, Porter Moser, elite defense, number 1 defensive team in the country, number 4 in field goal percentage offense. He is obviously a great X's and O's coach. So he is a guy that, I'll be honest, came onto my radar during that NCAA tournament. So there is the possibility, and I don't want to discredit the possibility, that Indiana is still pursuing guys that are currently coaching in this NCAA tournament. And as Nick Coffey and I will talk about in a minute, I certainly hope so. Because I don't think you pay Archie Miller $10 million to go away. I don't think you raise $10 million from boosters to go get a big name if you really don't know what you're doing going into this coaching search. But that is also what very much concerns me as I give you the update. Because the only real update we're getting is involving 2 candidates that I think would absolutely be terrible for this job, and that is Thad Matta, the former Ohio State coach, Mike Woodson, former Indiana player who has been in the NBA for basically the last 30 years. There was even a report that Thad Matta had accepted the job and failed a physical. That report ended up being false. But the bottom line is Rick Bozich, a really good reporter out of Louisville, reported that these are two names that have surfaced. And let me tell you this. I may believe that Indiana is a great job, but if they end up with either Thad Matta or Mike Woodson, I'm telling you, I'm out on the Indiana train. I'm never wearing pinstripe pants again because I just do not believe that it is an elite job if that is the best that you can do after firing the last coach and paying him $10 million. Let me explain why. Let's start with Thad Matta. At this point, to me, Thad Matta, and I've said this in a few different places, so I apologize if you've heard me say this, Thad Matta is basically the Bob Stoops of college basketball, right? Bob Stoops, for people that love college football, former Oklahoma head coach, won a national championship in 2000, retired about 4 or 5 years ago, handed over the program to Lincoln Riley, but he's still kind of in his mid-50s, and it feels like every single time a job opens up, Bob Stoops is the first name that everybody says, oh, Florida State, got to call Bob Stoops. Oh, USC, got to call Bob Stoops. And it's like we've gone through 3 or 4 coaching cycles, and it has become pretty apparent I just don't think Bob Stoops wants to coach anymore. And so I bring it up because of the fact that I feel like Thad Matta is kind of the same. Every single time a job opens up, his name comes up. Georgia, his name was a candidate there. Ole Miss, his name was a candidate there. I can't even think about all the other ones that have opened up. Those are 2 that come to mind. And now he's getting tossed around at Indiana. And I think we have to accept that the ship just might have sailed on Thad Matta, and even in a different way than Bob Stoops, where it's clear that Bob Stoops just doesn't want to coach. I'll be honest, I don't think that Thad Matta can coach even if he wants to. Because for people who have followed this stuff, for people who know a little bit about Thad Matta, what you need to know essentially about Thad Matta is this. This is no disrespect. I wish him the best. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's new information that I do not have available. But based on the most recent information we have on Thad Matta, he is not physically able to handle the stresses of being a big-time college basketball coach. For people who do not know his background, first of all, there is a reason. I should backtrack. There is a reason why he would make sense as a legitimate candidate at Indiana. Outside of John Beilein, I think he's basically the only coach that is currently unemployed, it kind of in that age range where you could come back to coach basketball, that has been to multiple Final Fours. He went to the Final Four in 2007 with Greg Oden and Mike Conley and all those guys. He went back in 2012 with Jared Sullinger and Aaron Kraft, who was in college forever. And so I see why people would be interested. But here is the bottom line, and this is really sad. And again, I hope there's an update that I'm not aware of. But physically, I don't think he can do the job. He got a back surgery in the late 2000s that really kind of, I hope I'm wrong, but messed him up physically. You read reports, he couldn't do the job of being a major college basketball coach. He was basically coaching practice from a stool late in his time at Ohio State. He was limited in how much he could travel, how much he could recruit, how much he could do the things that are required to be a head coach. There were even reports that he struggled to do things as simple as tie his shoes, put on his shoes, things like that. Maybe things have changed, but right now, I just don't believe that right now he is a guy that can physically handle this kind of coaching job. If this was a guy that the last time that he was a college basketball coach was basically coaching practice from a stool, and now you're going to put him into one of the highest pressure jobs in college basketball, that just doesn't even make sense to me. On top of that, I think that his actual performance is reflective in a guy that was really struggling physically towards the back end of his career. If you remember, those last couple of years at Ohio State were not good. In his last 4 years at Ohio State, he made 2 NCAA tournaments, only won 1 NCAA tournament game in his final 4 years, and his final 2 years, he missed the NCAA tournament altogether. It's worth mentioning, the one time he won an NCAA tournament game, he had D'Angelo Russell, who ended up being the number 2 overall pick in that following draft, and so he had elite talent. And so now you're telling me you're going to replace a guy in Archie Miller that didn't make an NCAA tournament in 4 years with a guy who won 1 NCAA tournament game in his final 4 years? I'm sorry. I don't see it. Forgive me. I don't think he's the guy. Beyond that, if Thad Matta is a bad hire, Mike Woodson is apocalyptically bad. And let me explain who Mike Woodson is and why people think that he might be a candidate. Mike Woodson played at Indiana kind of during the glory days under Bobby Knight with Isaiah Thomas in the early or late 70s into the early 80s. He actually left the year before they won the 1981 national championship. He has been in the NBA since. He's had a few NBA head coaching jobs, including with the Knicks. And Mike Woodson, I think, is being sold within Indiana circles as basically he could be Indiana's Juwan Howard, okay? So basically the idea being that Juwan Howard spent his entire career in the NBA, came to college at Michigan, has been incredible, and Mike Woodson can be that guy at Indiana. To which I say, please stop. That doesn't even make sense. That's not even comparing apples to oranges. That's comparing apples to a chocolate sundae, a strawberry shortcake. This is comparing apples to pancakes. It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't apply. Let me explain why. I understand the parallel. They both spent a bunch of time in the NBA. Here is the major difference, though. Juwan Howard is 48 years old. When he was hired at Michigan, he was 46 years old. He's young. He's affable. He's personable. And on top of that, he was a guy who at the time had a son who was being recruited as a major Division I prospect. That son now plays for him as a freshman at Michigan. But at the time when Juwan Howard took the job, he was in the gym watching his son play with a bunch of college coaches. And I've talked to college coaches who saw Juwan Howard around the gym and said, that guy's awesome. That guy would be great in college if he ever decided to come, because he understood how college worked. He understood how recruiting worked. He knew what he would need to do to have success in the college level if he ever decided to come. And that's being proven correct since he has gotten to Michigan. They're obviously a number 1 seed with a chance to go to the Elite Eight when they play Florida State over the weekend. Mike Woodson, on the other hand, not only has Mike Woodson not been in college in 30-plus years since he left Indiana, 40 years, 1980 he left Indiana. He hasn't been back on a college campus in any major way since then. On top of that, he's 62 years old. There is no comparison between him and Juwan Howard other than that at one point they were employed by the NBA. Juwan Howard is younger. Juwan Howard had a son who was being recruited. And so I just don't see how Mike Woodson makes sense for this job other than that he's an Indiana alum. Guess what? Mark Cuban is also an Indiana alum. Nobody is, arguing that he should be the head coach of this team. I don't believe Mike Woodson's the answer. As far as who is the answer, it remains to be seen. I've said from the beginning, I keep saying it to the point that I'm probably annoying about it now. I don't understand why you don't call John Beilein and keep calling John Beilein until he gives you an answer, until he says no, and then you add a couple zeros onto that paycheck until he says yes. By the way, for the record, I don't know John Beilein, never met him, so I'm not like in John Beilein's corner on this. I just think it's a no-brainer. And hopefully the AD at Indiana has some answers that maybe I'm not aware of. Maybe he is waiting to talk to people in the NCAA tournament. Maybe he does know of a coach in the NCAA tournament that would take this job. Again, Porter Moser would probably be my guy from Loyola if I had a choice. But I bring it up to say Indiana has to start making moves, and I'll wrap on this. They really got to start making moves because the transfer portal is bumping. And as I told you a couple times already, we are going to talk transfer portal next week once this Final Four gets settled because the transfer portal is bananas right now. The transfer portal has so many good players, and guess what? By the way, I mentioned it before. collegebasketballtransfers.com. Me and my crew there are keeping track of everything you need to know. But beyond that, how about this? 4 players have entered the portal for Indiana since Archie Miller has been fired, including 3 of their 4 leading scorers. Trace Jackson Davis was their leading scorer. He will probably go to the NBA. After that, Armand Franklin, second leading scorer, is now in the portal. Al Durham, third leading scorer, is now in the portal. Race Thompson, fourth leading scorer, entered the portal on Wednesday, as well as Parker Stewart, a transfer who was sitting out this year. And I am just telling you, the longer Indiana waits, the less likely it is that they not only get the guy that they want, but 2, that they even have a team to come back to. Because the one thing about college basketball, these players understand they're not going to sit around and wait around for a month for Indiana to figure out who their coach is. They want answers or they will move on and find the school that fits them best. But again, 3 of Indiana's top 4 scorers from this past season have entered the portal. On top of that, a fourth player. So 4 players overall from this season are now in the portal. And if you're Indiana, I hope you have a plan, because this is changing really quick, and you need to find a head coach.